The rise and fall of First Empire of the world. Imagine a time when no empire existed, only scattered city-states, each ruled by its own proud king and protected by its own gods. Then, out of the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, a man rose who changed everything. He began as an unknown servant and ended as a legend, the founder of the first true empire in human history. His name was Sargon of Akkad, and his ambition would reshape the world forever. Around the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE, a new power emerged from the northern cities of Mesopotamia and remade the map of the ancient Near East. Sargon of Akkad, born, as the legends say, in obscurity and risen to power through daring and organization, cut across the patchwork of city-states that had long dominated southern Mesopotamia. Where Sumerian cities had been independent, ruled by temple priests and local kings, Sargon created something different. The first great territorial empire known to history, centered on the city of Akkad, Akkad, and stretching from the Mediterranean trade routes in the west to the Zagros foothills in the east. Sargon's innovation was both military and administrative. He forged a standing political center that could project force beyond its immediate hinterland, maintaining garrisons, securing supply lines, and establishing loyal governors in conquered cities. He spoke a Semitic language that later scholars call Akkadian, but he ruled over a majority Sumerian population and adopted many Sumerian institutions. The result was a hybrid imperial culture that used Sumerian cuneiform writing for administration while gradually spreading Akkadian as a spoken and written language across the region. Under Sargon's heirs, especially his grandson Naram-Sin, the empire reached its high point. Naram-Sin styled himself not merely as a king but as King of the Four Quarters, and even claimed a kind of divine status. He was depicted in monumental art with a horned helmet, a symbol later reserved for gods. The famous victory stele of Naram-Sin captures this idea. The king ascending a mountain, trampling defeated foes, framed by cosmic symbols that reinforce imperial destiny. Economically, the empire thrived on long-distance trade, copper from Oman, timber from the Levant, luxury goods and textiles, as well as on intensified agricultural production in the irrigated plains. Administrative records from this era show an energetic bureaucracy. Inventories, rations for soldiers and workers, temple accounts, and legal decisions that kept the imperial machine supplied and functioning. Culturally, Akkad was a melding point. The Akkadian language and Semitic names spread into the south. Sumerian literary, religious, and administrative traditions continued and mingled with Akkadian elements. The scribal schools wrote in both languages. New gods and old deities were fused together, and artistic styles blended Sumerian realism with northern motifs. Innovations in law, record-keeping, and governance set patterns later empires would follow. Yet the empire's strength hid deep vulnerabilities. It covered diverse peoples and ecologies. Its communication networks were long for the time, and maintaining distant garrisons and governors required immense resources. In the generations after Naram-Sin, the center weakened. External pressures, nomadic or semi-nomadic groups such as the Gudians from the Zagros, pushed into Mesopotamia. Internal strains, local rebellions, and the difficulty of sustaining centralized control across a vast territory further frayed imperial cohesion. Some scholars believe climate played a part. Evidence suggests a severe drought hit Mesopotamia around this time, drying up rivers and wrecking harvests. Starving cities rebelled. Grain shipments stopped. The empire's structure, once so strong, crumbled from within and finally Akkad was gone. But Sargon's idea endured. The concept of empire, one ruler claiming authority over many lands and peoples, was born in Akkad and passed down to the Assyrians, Babylonians, and Persians. Akkadian became the language of diplomacy, and Sargon's legend inspired kings for more than 1,000 years. The story of Akkad is more than history. It's the moment humanity first learned how to build, rule, and lose an empire. The rise of a dream. Babylon rose from the dust of ancient Sumer. A small city at first, but destined to become the beating heart of an empire. Its greatest early king, Hammurabi, united the land through power and purpose. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a lawgiver. And his creation, the Code of Hammurabi, became one of humanity's first written systems of justice. An eye for an eye, A tooth for a tooth. It wasn't mercy that defined Babylon, it was order. The idea that society could be shaped by law, not chaos. Centuries later, under Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon reached its golden age. Behind its colossal walls stretched a city so vast, so luminous, that ancient travelers called it the Gate of the Gods. The streets shimmered with blue-glazed bricks. Merchants filled the markets with spices, gold, and jewels from every corner of the known world. And at the city's heart rose the ziggurat of Etemenanke, a mountain of man-made stone said to touch the heavens. Some say it was the Tower of Babel itself. Life here was structured, ordered, and layered. At the top, the king chosen by the gods. Then priests and scribes, the keepers of wisdom. Below them, merchants, craftsmen, and farmers, whose labor fed and fueled the empire. Babylon's fields stretched wide with barley and dates. Its canals turned the desert green. Its artisans built homes of sun-baked brick. Its traders crossed seas and sands. And in every home, clay tablets recorded daily life, wages, marriages, prayers, tiny echoes of voices that still whisper through time. The Babylonians lived in a world ruled by the divine. Their chief god was Marduk, the champion of order, who defeated chaos and created the world. Temples weren't just for worship. They were centers of power, science, and knowledge. Priests read the stars, seeking signs of the god's will. From those ancient watchers came the birth of astronomy, the first calendars, the first predictions of eclipses. Even today, when you divide an hour into 60 minutes or a circle into 360 degrees, you're using Babylonian math. Legend says that Nebuchadnezzar built the Hanging Gardens for his queen, a mountain of green terraces, fed by hidden aqueducts, a paradise in the desert. No one knows if they truly existed, but their memory endured as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Babylonian families lived by written law and divine order. Women could own land, run businesses, and go to court, rare freedoms in the ancient world. Marriage was sacred, sealed in clay. Children learned reading and mathematics, the language of cuneiform pressed into tablets of wet earth. They baked barley bread, brewed beer, and sang hymns to the gods at dusk. Their lives were simple, yet deeply bound to the rhythms of the divine. The fall of Babylon. No empire lasts forever. In 539 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus the Great marched upon Babylon. No walls were breached, no blood was spilled. The gates opened, and the great city bowed. Cyrus honored Marduk, restored order, and allowed exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return home. Babylon became part of Persia's empire, and its glory slowly faded into legend. The fact is, Babylon never truly died. Its laws shaped justice. Its numbers shaped science. Its myths shaped religion and story. From Hammurabi's stone to the stars above, the Babylonian legacy runs through every civilization that followed. It was the world's first great experiment, the dream of a people who sought to bring order to chaos, heaven to earth, and eternity to clay. The ruins of Babylon may lie silent today, but in the ticking of every clock, and in the turning of every degree, the heartbeat of that ancient city still lives.
The rise and fall of the Assyrian Empire. They called themselves the Chosen of Ashur, the Hammer of Nations. From the banks of the Tigris, the Assyrians rose not just to rule, but to dominate through sheer terror. At first, they were a small kingdom surrounded by powerful rivals, Babylonians to the south, Hittites to the west. But Assyria had something others feared: discipline. Their kings forged an army unlike any seen before: iron weapons, chariots, siege towers. They were the first true war machine of the ancient world. City after city fell. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, the Assyrians built an empire so vast that their messengers could take weeks to cross it. Capitals like Nimrud, Nineveh, and Dur-Sharrukin gleamed with colossal palaces, carved reliefs, and winged guardian statues, symbols of a power that seemed divine. But here comes the heart of their story, the hook that makes history remember them not just as rulers, but as a warning. The Assyrians ruled through terror. When they conquered a city, they left no doubt who was in charge. Walls dripped with the blood of rebels, prisoners were impaled, flayed, or dragged in chains before their kings. Fear kept the empire together, but fear is a fragile glue. For generations, their brutality worked. But in the shadows, hatred grew. When the mighty king Ashurbanipal died, the machine began to break. The cities they once crushed now rose in revenge. The Babylonians and Medes joined forces, and the hunters became the hunted. In 612 BCE, the unthinkable happened. Nineveh, the proud capital of Assyria, burned. The walls that once terrified the world were torn apart by those they had once enslaved. The empire of iron fell into silence. And yet, their legacy never truly vanished. Their methods of warfare, administration, and art would shape empires for centuries, even those who despised them borrowed from them. The Assyrians had built an empire through fear. And in the end, fear destroyed it.
The Hittites were among the great powers of the ancient Near East, rising in Anatolia around the 17th century BCE and establishing one of the first organized empires in recorded history. From their capital at Hattusa, located in the central plateau of modern-day Turkey, they ruled a vast domain that rivaled Egypt, Babylonia, and Assyria. Their empire became a defining force of the late Bronze Age world. Their success rested on a strong administrative system and an effective military organization. The Hittites were among the earliest civilizations to master the working of iron, giving them both technological and strategic advantages. They built fortified cities, developed a network of roads and outposts, and introduced a well-structured bureaucracy that managed trade, agriculture, and diplomacy with remarkable precision. Politically, the Hittite Empire operated as a monarchy but with notable institutional features. The king, regarded as the Great King, ruled with divine sanction but was bound by laws and traditions that limited his authority. A council of nobles, known as the Pancus, could intervene in matters of succession or justice, an early indication of shared governance. Their religion reflected the diversity of their empire. The Hittites absorbed deities from conquered peoples, forming a vast pantheon known as the Thousand Gods of Hutti. The storm god Tarhun and the sun goddess Arina were central figures in their belief system. Religious festivals and rituals played an essential role in maintaining political legitimacy and unity across the realm. Culturally, the Hittites left an enduring legacy in law and diplomacy. They produced one of the earliest codified legal systems, emphasizing compensation over retribution. They also recorded one of the first known peace treaties in history, the Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt, concluded after their famous battle against Pharaoh Ramses II around 1274 BCE. This document, preserved in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform, remains a milestone in the development of international relations. Despite their strength, the Hittite Empire faced constant challenges. Internal rivalries, shifting alliances, and external pressures from rising powers, such as the Assyrians and the mysterious Sea Peoples, gradually weakened their stability. Around 1200 BCE, their capital Hattusa was destroyed, marking the end of their imperial power and the collapse of the late Bronze Age world system. A small Neo-Hittite states persisted in northern Syria and southeastern Anatolia for several centuries, preserving elements of their language, art, and political culture. Archaeological discoveries at Hattusa and other sites, temples, royal archives, and monumental reliefs, have revealed much about their achievements and worldview. The rediscovery of the Hittite civilization in the early 20th century transformed our understanding of ancient history. The decipherment of their cuneiform tablets demonstrated that they spoke an Indo-European language, the oldest known written form of that linguistic family. This revelation linked them not only to the Near Eastern world but also to the cultural ancestry of much of Europe. In the broader scope of history, the Hittites stand as a bridge between East and West, between Bronze Age traditions and the coming Iron Age. Their innovations in governance, law, diplomacy, and technology laid foundations that influenced later civilizations. Though their empire fell, their legacy endures. In the stone ruins of Hattusa, in the tablets that preserved their words, and in the memory of a people who once ruled at the crossroads of empires. How brutality of Assyrians created an empire. Medes and creation of First Iranian Empire. Who were the Medes? The Medes belonged to the larger family of Indo-Iranian peoples who migrated into Iran, around the end of the second millennium BCE. They were horsemen, herders, and warriors, living in loosely connected clans across the land known as Media, roughly modern-day northwestern Iran. But unlike their Persian cousins who lived farther south, the Medes were on the front lines. To their west loomed the Assyrian Empire, brutal, disciplined, and feared across the ancient Near East. The shadow of Assyria. For centuries, the Assyrians dominated Mesopotamia with an iron fist. They were not just conquerors, they were masters of psychological warfare. Their armies crushed cities, deported populations, and carved terrifying reliefs that showed the fate of rebels. Flayed alive, impaled, or chained. The Medes, scattered in their mountain valleys, felt this power firsthand. Assyrian kings launched constant raids into Median territory, burning villages, demanding tribute, and enslaving their people. Without unity, the Medes were easy prey. But over time, oppression had an unexpected effect. It forced the Medes to come together. What had once been independent tribes realized that survival depended on cooperation. The birth of a kingdom. According to Greek historian Herodotus, the first great unifier was Deioces. Known for his wisdom and sense of justice, he became the natural choice when the tribes decided to appoint a king. Under his rule, the Medes built their first capital city, Ecbatana. It wasn't just a settlement, it was a symbol. High walls, fortresses, and palaces showed the world that the Medes were no longer just wandering tribes, but a people with ambition and identity. Deioces brought order, but it was his successors who turned the Medes into a power. Phraates, his son, began expanding their influence, uniting more Iranian tribes under the Median banner. But the real turning point came under Cyaxares, one of the greatest Median kings. Cyaxares and the fall of Assyria. Cyaxares understood the Assyrian strengths, but also their weaknesses. He reorganized the Median army, creating specialized units. Archers, cavalry, infantry, a professional force capable of standing against Assyria. Then, in a bold move, he allied with the Babylonians, who also suffered under Assyrian domination. Together, they struck back. In 612 BCE, the Medes and Babylonians besieged Nineveh, the jewel of the Assyrian Empire. The city fell, and with it collapsed an empire that had terrorized the Near East for centuries. For the first time, the Medes stood as equals among the great powers of the world. Legacy of the Medes. The Median Empire stretched across Iran, eastern Anatolia, and parts of Mesopotamia. Though it lasted less than a century before being absorbed by the Persians under Cyrus the Great, the Medes laid the foundations of Iranian statehood. They showed that scattered tribes could unite, that even against the might of Assyria, resistance could succeed. And in their rise and fall, they passed on the torch of empire to the Persians, who would build upon their example and create one of the greatest empires in history. Life in the Median Empire: culture, society, and religion. When we think of the Medes, we often picture their kings and their battles with the Assyrians. But what was life actually like inside their empire? How were their people organized? What did they believe in? Society and social organization. The Medes inherited much from their Indo-Iranian roots, a society shaped by clans, warriors, and herders. But as they formed a kingdom, society became more structured. The king and nobility. At the very top was the king, considered chosen by the gods to rule. Around him stood a class of nobles and powerful clan leaders who controlled land and warriors. These were the backbone of the Median state, providing both loyalty and military strength. The warriors. Like many Iranian peoples, the Medes valued the warrior class highly. Cavalry and skilled archers were their pride. A man's honor was tied to his courage in battle, and much of their expansion was carried on horseback. Common people. Farmers, herders, and craftsmen made up the bulk of society. They worked the land, raised animals, and produced goods. The fertile valleys around Ecbatana and Media's mountains allowed both farming and pasturing horses and sheep. Subject peoples. As the Medes expanded, they ruled over diverse groups: Persians, Armenians, Assyrians, and others. Many of these groups were allowed to keep their own traditions, but they paid tribute to the Median kings. What made the Medes unique is that they weren't trying to erase the cultures they conquered. Instead, They absorbed and blended traditions, a habit the Persians later perfected. Culture and daily life. The Medes left behind fewer monuments than the later Persians, but archaeology and ancient sources give us hints. Ecbatana, their capital, was said by Herodotus to be surrounded by 7 concentric walls, each painted in different colors, from white and black to red, blue, and finally gold and silver at the top. Whether myth or truth, it shows how important symbolism and display were in Median culture. They were skilled in horse breeding and animal husbandry, which gave them both military power and prestige. Horses were a mark of status. Their clothing was distinct: trousers and long-sleeve tunics, practical for riding and the cold mountains, later adopted widely across the Persian Empire. Artifacts suggest that Median artisans were influenced by Assyrian and Urartian art, blending Mesopotamian motifs with Iranian steppe traditions. Religion and beliefs. Religion tied their world together. The Medes shared a spiritual outlook with other ancient Iranians, and though details are scarce, historians believe they followed an early form of Indo-Iranian polytheism, with gods linked to natural forces, sky, fire, and water. Many of these deities were precursors to those in Zoroastrianism, which later flourished under the Persians. Fire had a sacred role, possibly worshipped in open-air sanctuaries on hilltops, as it was a symbol of purity and the divine. They practiced rituals of sacrifice, likely involving animals, and may have believed in cosmic struggles between good and evil, ideas later refined by Zoroaster. Some classical sources even mention magi among the Medes, priestly families who oversaw religious rites, kept traditions, and interpreted omens. These magi later became influential under the Persian kings. The bigger picture. What's fascinating is that Median society was a bridge, from nomadic tribes to a centralized monarchy, from clan-based beliefs to the beginnings of organized priesthoods, from mountain villages to a multi-ethnic empire. They never developed the monumental architecture or writing system of Mesopotamia, but their political and cultural patterns shaped what came after. Without the Medes, the Persian Empire might never have taken the form it did. Thank you for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't lose next episodes.